Welcome to the Farmer Tom Cast. Today we have legendary cannabis advocate Jeremy John Robbins. How's it going, Jeremy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell the world who you are and what you've done in the cannabis space.
Well, it's a story that goes back a pretty long time, over half my life ago. I am not proud of the fact that I stole the first cannabis plants that I found when I was 16 years old, and I took them home and put them in my parents' backyard. I had no idea really what they were or what was going on, and it was a buddy of mine as well that had them, and they lasted maybe a week, and then I pulled all of the leaves off of it and put it in a bag and gave it to yet another friend of mine. And yeah, that's where my fascination for this plant really started. But the reality is that cannabis and I had a very kind of minor relationship until I broke my neck. That happened 23 years ago when I was riding my bicycle and I crashed. I became a quadriplegic. I'm a very high functioning quadriplegic, but I also deal with a lot of chronic issues, pain, and spasticity. And so when I first was injured, I took a bunch of different medications, 15 upwards every day, like multiple times every day. They had an effect for sure, but I also realized like the long term that it wasn't really going to be a very good combination for me to remain on. And so I started just like eliminating prescriptions here and there. I was able to eliminate most everything with the help of cannabis. I smoked it primarily, and then kind of secondary to that, I started using edibles in 2002. Wow. Yeah. So 20 years ago, I applied for and received my OMMP card. That is an Oregon Medical Marijuana Patient Card. And I was enrolled in that program up until this last February. And so a solid 20 years as a legal medical patient in the state of Oregon. During that time, when I first got my card, like I can remember asking my doctor if he knew anything about like the program, and he just was like, "No, I don't," and he just signed it, and that was that. And so it was really left up to me to figure out a how I was going to obtain cannabis, b how I was going to obtain it, consistently. Some perks to it, meaning that I could grow my own. And so I had a good friend, and he agreed to be my grower. He provided the space, and we began seed hunting. We split the costs of most everything. Our first seed run was primarily from genetics that he had been storing for a number of years. We popped 100 seeds. The reason that we did this is we thought, okay, well, 100 seeds, they were all regular seeds. So 50 of them probably will be female. Of those 50, 25 of them we probably aren't going to really want to keep for one reason or another. And then of the other 25, we should be able to go through those and keep about 12. And that was the goal. Well, 99 of 100 of those seeds sprouted, and 98 of those 99 plants were female. And they were all incredibly unique and very different than anything that you see today. A lot of really very, very old school flavors. That's the best way that I could describe them. A lot of cultivars that had gone through Eugene. They're yeah, they were really wonderful plants. And so we ended up giving away a number of them, like 50 of them, and we did keep a few, and those plants sustained us for a good couple of years. And then we ended up having his brother purchase and retrieve seeds from BC, Canada. And In that first batch of seeds from like 2003, we had some really amazing plants. We had a Cincy Seed Banks hash plant that was just off the charts. We had a number of phenos of bubblegum that were just, again, like nothing that you get today, just incredibly dank. Very, very like sweet and uh, oh, it's been so long since I've experienced those flavors. It's difficult to come up with adjectives for them. But anyway, just like bubblegum. Um, we had a plant from Mr. Nice Seeds that was called Shit. And so, nice shit. And those were the most incredibly spicy plants that we ever had. They did not grow very large. They were really, I think, cultivars that were from like the Middle East or maybe the Far East, like India. Um, man, so we had kind of like this first generation of seeds that were really, really unique. Um, uh, Bred. Oh, we had Northern Lights #5. That was just this huge, droopy, dark. Um, it had like a forest flavor to it, is what I would call it, like mossy with some pine. Um, so, this second kind of wave of seeds that we had sustained us until probably like, oh, I don't know, like '06 maybe, or '07. And at that point in time, like I had started meeting a lot of people around Portland. We started, collecting clones, trading clones. Um, and yeah, I also, increased in the size of grows. I partnered with a friend of mine that happened to own a grow shop. He had a shop that we converted to a grow. It was 12 plant, 12 light, 12,000 watt grow. And so we grew these gigantic trees inside that were like, 9, 10 feet tall. We had a Leda Uno was a great strain from that early 2000s. A Blue City Diesel. We grew a lot of Blue City Diesel. Some blueberry, Trinity. Those two were clones that came directly from Eugene, from some folks that we had met along the way. And I should mention that in those very first run of seeds that my buddy Johnny and I had found, we found this really, really unique cultivar that we called the Prophet, and not like money profit, but like the Prophet Allah. It made you see God, right? And we kept this strain all along, and I would pass it out to people. I was always growing it. It was a very, very strange sativa. It grew pretty short. It flowered really fast. It tasted very like minty with some berry. And man, we called that speed weed. It absolutely just got you hyper focused, hyper vigilant, hyper on top of it, and it had no ceiling. So you could smoke it and smoke it and smoke it, and you just got higher and higher and higher. And so having that cultivar was really great. It helped me get through college. Like literally, I wrote all of my college papers by smoking this stuff and drinking coffee. And so what was happening too, as we were experimenting with all these cultivars, is that I was like trying to feel out what worked best for my conditions. And for me, a heavy indica like is okay, um, somewhat, but I really found that I needed uplifting varieties, and so that's a lot of what we focused on. I had another buddy in a wheelchair, and he was also a pretty prolific grower. And he acquired seeds of the strain called Federation's Hawaiian Sativa. And the Hawaiian Sativa was this gigantic octopus of a plant, and it just had like the most incredible, like lemony, incensey sort of flavor to it. Um, Along with that, we also were growing a lot of Cinderella 99. Um, in fact, I believe that cutting we ended up giving to you at one time or another. Um, oh, let's see. There was also down the line, there ended up being like Cinex. Um, and then we grew a variety called Pitbull from Stony Girl Gardens. Jennifer Valet was the winner of an Oregon and actually I think a High Times Cup, and so we grew a bunch of her cultivars for a while, and that was nice. She just recently passed away, and I hope she's in a better place. Um, so it's always been interesting. Like we had a lot of these old varieties. We didn't do a lot of cross breeding. Typically, most of those that we dealt with way back when were pretty stable. Um, with the exception of blueberry, I have always struggled with blueberry. It's a very strange plant, and it is always slightly hermaphroditic, and it would always do things, and the Hawaiian sativa, it would stress herm, and it crossed with a bunch of stuff, and so we kind of like this third wave of genetics that we dealt with were a crossing of this Hawaiian sativa with a bunch of different stuff, and we grew those out for quite a while, and right about that time, we also got a really, really nice cutting of OG Kush. And, there's certain strains along the way that kind of like change your life. And this particular cut of OG Kush did that. And it was actually, I believe, Afghan Kush. And it grew pretty squat. It didn't get very tall. It had very dark leaves, like little golf ball flowers. So more of like an indica version of OG Kush. But man, that stuff tastes like nothing else. I can't even really describe the flavor. The cushiest of Kushes. There's another variety called Woody's Kush that we acquired that had a similar taste profile. But most of the Kushes, other OG Kushes that we acquired or dealt with had more like, a lemon type profile with like a gas undertone. And this did not. This was like straight, just all gas, no brakes. And that variety did like, it really did change things for me. It was the perfect combination of sedation and uplifting. And so, like, I could basically use it all the time from noon, I mean, from morning until noon until night. And it just killed my spasms. It really did a pretty good job at helping me, like, deal with the pain, cope with the pain. And yeah, it was great. But you know, all things come to pass, and unfortunately, we lost it along the way, and we've never found it since. Right? This is the problem with most cultivars, and it just you can crossbreed things, and there are definitely like similarities to the original parentage, and sometimes you do get really lucky, and it will like be spot on one or the other. Um, but yeah, um, the preservation of genetics, I think, is as important, and their stories is as important as the people that have cultivated them. Um, and so, yeah, I feel like I've always been a steward of the plant. I haven't really ever like tapped into anything remotely that made any sort of money. And that's been okay. So up until about 2009, I was always growing with partners and mostly indoors. And I graduated with my master's degree in 2009. And I figured, screw it. If I get busted for anything, they can't take away my education because I was finished with that. So I began growing at my parents' home in Washington State. There were at that time there were some really unique laws, and so the way that the medical programs were set up for both Oregon and Washington, you could be a medical patient in either one of those states without being a permanent resident in that state. Oregon probably had like the most liberal and open. And so I knew of people that were from California and people that were from, Idaho, people that were from Washington, and they all were a part of the OMMP. Um, but the way that it worked here in Washington is if you had a Washington State ID card, which was really easy for me to get, again, my parents lived here, then you could apply for a medical permit and then you could grow. And the way that the law is set up in Washington, they just state that you can grow 15 plants. They don't like make a distinction between like, vegging plants and flowering plants or any of these other things. And so for an outdoor garden, which is what I decided to do because I didn't have the money nor the resources really to do an indoor grow, it really made perfect sense. And so I started um, growing outdoors, and it was a lot of the same varieties that we had been growing indoors. So Cinex was a part of my very first crop. Bless that strain; it's done so fast, and it stinks like weird cheese, and has a really great high, great bag appeal.